This is the Kava Bar Deep Dive, where we explore the vibe inside. Flip through the menu, see what's new. Read the reviews, get a clue.
Okay, so today we're going deep on Kavasutra Kava Bar.
Right?
And this is all thanks to you, the listener.
Yeah.
You sent us a bunch of stuff on their website, some news articles, customer reviews, even a YouTube interview.
Nice.
So basically what we're trying to do is figure out, like, what is this place all about?
Right.
Like, where'd they come from and what's their reputation like these days?
Yeah, I think people are curious about this whole Kava Bar scene, so let's give them the full picture
Yeah, let's do it.
of Kavasutra.
Okay, so first things first, like for anyone who's never heard of this stuff, what is kava?
Okay, so kava is this root. It comes from the South Pacific Islands,
Okay.
and it's got like a super long history. We're talking like over 3,000 years.
Wow.
And traditionally, they used it for like all kinds of stuff, celebrations, resolving conflicts, even just like chilling out and hanging out.
Interesting.
Yeah, so to make it, they grind up the root, mix it with water, and then strain it. And Kavasutra, they serve it in these things called shells, which are basically like those coconut shell halves you see.
Oh, yeah.
Like that classic South Pacific vibe.
I get it.
Yeah.
So they're going for that whole like traditional feel.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so right off the bat, Kavasutra is calling themselves America's finest kava bar.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah, they say they import this like high-grade kava roots straight from Vanuatu.
Which, Vanuatu's known for having really good kava.
Okay, so that checks out.
Yeah. And the atmosphere they're going for is like all about relaxing, being tranquil, welcoming, like a place to just kind of unwind.
Sounds pretty chill.
Yeah. And they're really pushing kava as like this healthy, safe alternative to alcohol.
Okay.
Saying it doesn't mess with your head or anything.
Interesting. So no mind-altering effects is what they're saying.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're setting the stage for like a premium kava experience in a super laid-back environment.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's rewind a bit. Like, how did this whole thing get started and how did they get so big?
All right. So Kavasutra opened their first location on December 26th, 2008 in Lake Worth, Florida.
Okay.
And they've been growing steadily ever since.
So they've expanded quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a growing interest in kava in the U.S.
That's true.
And Kavasutra is riding that wave. They've got locations in multiple states, mainly Florida, of course.
Right.
Some people even call it the kava capital.
I've heard that.
But they're also in New York, Colorado, and Arizona.
Wow.
We're talking roughly 30 locations across those states.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And if you're curious about specifics, we've got the details on some of their spots. In Florida, they started in Lake Worth, but they're also in places like Fort Lauderdale, Deerfield Beach, North Palm Beach, Delray Beach, Palm Bay.
Okay.
And there's New York. They had 2 locations in the East Village, but it's kind of unclear if they're still operating there because of some issues we'll talk about later.
All right.
In Colorado, they're in Denver on East Colfax Avenue and also in Lakewood.
Gotcha.
And in Arizona, you'll find them in Phoenix and Tempe.
So they're covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, they're definitely ambitious. Their website even says they're considered the best kava bar in America.
Yeah, they're not shy about that claim.
No, they're not. So we'll see how that holds up as we look at different perspectives on them.
Exactly.
So now let's dive into what it's actually like to go to Kavasutra,
Okay.
at least based on some of the earlier, more positive reviews.
Yeah, let's see what people were saying back in the day.
Yeah, so looking at those reviews, there's this recurring theme of like a welcoming atmosphere and a really chill vibe.
Okay.
People talk about the drinks being delicious, the place having an exotic feel, and just being a great spot to relax and de-stress.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah, some people even said they felt like they were floating, which sounds pretty nice.
Yeah, that does sound pretty appealing.
It was often recommended as a must-try for anyone looking for something unique and non-alcoholic.
Right, like a different kind of social experience.
Exactly. And for first-timers, the advice was often to try it naked, meaning just plain kava to get the pure taste. And a lot of people mention that tingly, slightly numb feeling you get on your tongue.
Oh, yeah.
That's like a classic kava thing. It's totally normal.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. And the YouTube interview we watched, they talk about how they make their kava.
Okay.
They specifically said they use authentic squeeze kava, which means blending the root with water, soaking it, and then straining it through a cloth.
So they're going the traditional route.
Yeah, exactly. Not like that instant or isolate stuff you sometimes see.
Okay.
And a big point they made is that kava is kind of like alcohol in the sense that it relaxes you, but it doesn't mess with your head.
Yeah, that's a comparison that comes up a lot.
Right. So initially, it seems like a pretty unique and potentially really enjoyable experience.
Yeah, it does.
But as with most things, there's more to the story.
Okay.
We also found some pretty serious controversies
Uh-oh.
and like a noticeable shift in how some people view Kavasutra.
So things get a little messy.
Yeah, you could say that there are a few key events and patterns of behavior that seem to have contributed to this change.
Okay, let's break it down.
The first big issue popped up back in 2013.
What happened?
So it turns out the owner, Dylan Harrison, has some legal baggage in his past.
Okay.
He was involved in a synthetic marijuana operation. They called it Mr. Nice Guy.
Seriously?
Yeah, and he even spent a year in prison because of it.
Wow, that's not exactly what you expect from someone running a wellness-focused business.
Yeah, it definitely raises some eyebrows.
It makes you wonder about their whole healthy alternative thing.
Right.
Okay, so fast forward to 2018, and things start getting even more complicated with their social media.
Yeah, this is where things take a pretty dark turn.
What they do.
Their Instagram account started posting some really offensive stuff. We're talking transphobic and sexist remarks, promoting this thing called a genetic female slam with some seriously nasty hashtags.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was bad. And the owner actually admitted to writing those posts.
Wow, so no denying it.
Nope. And as you can imagine, this sparked a lot of backlash and even some confrontations at their actual location.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
And sadly, this wasn't an isolated incident.
Oh, no.
In 2021, they did it again. More inflammatory posts. This time it was anti-mask, anti-teacher stuff. You know, all that tension surrounding the pandemic.
Right.
They also made some derogatory comments about New York and Colorado.
Really?
Yeah, and more of that transphobic stuff crept back in.
Oh, that's disappointing.
It is. And in that same year, they threw this Cholo-themed costume party at their Jupiter, Florida location.
Seriously?
Yeah, and people called them out for cultural appropriation.
I mean, that's just not cool.
No, it's not. So you can see how all this would lead to some pretty negative opinions about them.
Yeah, people were saying to avoid the bar because of these offensive views.
Exactly. And when you look at online reviews, those issues definitely show up.
Really?
Yeah. Some people specifically mention experiencing racism or just feeling unwelcome.
That's really unfortunate.
It is. And it really clashes with their whole initial message of being this relaxing, tranquil, welcoming environment.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark contrast.
It is. So those social media controversies definitely hurt their image.
Yeah, I bet.
But on top of that, they also ran into some legal trouble, especially in New York City.
What happened there?
Well, in November 2022, they got a summons from the New York City Department of Health.
Uh-oh.
And then in 2023, things got even worse.
Yeah.
Both of their East Village locations were temporarily shut down by the Department of Health.
Wow.
Yeah, the city took a really hard line. They basically said kava was poisonous and injurious to health.
That's intense.
It's Kavasutra apparently sued the city in response.
So they're fighting back.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because other kava bars in New York were also getting cracked down on around the same time.
So it seems like the city had a problem with kava in general.
Yeah, that's the impression I got.
So is it clear if those New York locations are back open?
Not really. The latest info we could find was kind of vague.
Okay, so that's definitely something to keep in mind.
It is, especially because their whole healthy and safe claim kind of goes out the window when the city's health department is calling kava poisonous.
Right, that's a huge contradiction.
It is, and it really shows how different people view kava and how complicated it can be to introduce it into new places.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So given all these controversies and legal issues, I think it's really important to look at what actual customers are saying.
Yeah, let's get into those reviews.
All right, so remember we mentioned earlier that the reviews are a mixed bag.
Yeah.
On Yelp, the average rating seems to bounce between 3.3 and 3.7 stars, depending on where you look.
Okay.
And the number of reviews varies to anywhere from around 50 to almost 300.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But the real insights come from reading what people actually wrote.
Yeah, the details are where it's at.
Exactly. So let's start with the good stuff. What were some of the positive things you noticed?
Okay, so focusing on their original location in Lake Worth, the Google reviews really give you a sense of the range.
Okay.
We see a lot of really positive comments. People shout out specific staff members like Lily Esther Annuals, Cedric Wayne, Brian Jacob, and Sam.
Wow, they remember everyone's names.
Right. They say these employees are super friendly and knowledgeable.
Okay, so good service is a plus.
Yeah, and a lot of people describe the atmosphere as chill and welcoming, which lines up with what Kavasutra is trying to project.
Makes sense.
For some regulars, it seems like it really is their second home.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, they talk about connecting with people in a non-alcoholic environment. They mention the music being good, like lo-fi beats, live bands, or DJs.
Sounds pretty relaxing.
Yeah, it seems like it ticks the boxes for people who want to unwind without alcohol.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, there were also some pretty concerning negative reviews.
Okay, what were people complaining about?
Well, some mentioned rude staff, poor service, like being ignored or rushed, and even feeling like they were unfairly asked to leave.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and it seems like the drink quality wasn't always consistent. Some complaints about watered-down kratom. And of course, how kava tastes is subjective, but some people really didn't like it. They said it tasted like dirt or even piss. Yeah, and then there were some more serious accusations. Some people described a gang atmosphere or said they felt unwelcome because of their race.
That's really troubling.
It is, and there were even claims that people were kicked out if they weren't buying enough drinks.
Wow, that's not a good look.
No, it's not. And then there are these reports of people having really bad reactions to the kava.
Like what?
People mentioned nausea, vomiting, and even passing out.
Oh, no.
Yeah, one review was especially worrying. It said someone lost control of their legs and arms after drinking a strong kava.
That's scary.
Yeah. And we can't forget about the political stuff. Some people mentioned seeing controversial displays like a Ron DeSantis cutout.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, not exactly a neutral vibe.
No, not at all. So those reviews paint a much more complicated and sometimes pretty disturbing picture.
Yeah, they do.
Compared to the company's own marketing.
Right, and the inconsistencies in service and drink quality, plus those reports of bad reactions, are definitely red flags.
They are. It really makes you question their whole safety spiel.
Exactly. Like on their website, they say there are no known side effects as long as you use common sense and follow instructions.
Right.
And they say kava is this healthy, safe alternative to alcohol with no mind-altering effects.
But that YouTube interview we watched kind of contradicts that.
Oh, yeah. How so?
They talked about this thing called ketosis, which is basically what happens when you drink too much kava.
Okay.
They said it can make you lose control of your muscles so you can't walk, and you might even throw up.
Wow.
But the weird thing is they said you stay mentally clear throughout the whole ordeal.
That sounds kind of intense.
Yeah, it does. And they even admitted that it happens in their stores pretty often.
Seriously.
Yeah, so much for no known side effect.
Right. And then there was that Yelp review where someone said they were sick for 36 hours after having a drink there.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound safe.
Nope. And remember how the New York City Department of Health called kava poisonous, injurious to health, and unsafe?
Right? Has a pretty stark contrast to what Kavasutra is claiming.
Yeah, it is.
The YouTube interview did mention something about liver problems, though.
Oh, yeah. What was that about?
They said there were reports online connecting liver problems to pava extracts, which I think is a misspelling of kava extracts.
Okay.
But they were quick to point out that traditional kava prep is different from those extracts.
Right. So maybe there's a difference in safety there.
Maybe. And here's another interesting thing. While most people use kava to relax, there have been reports that it can actually cause anxiety in some people.
Really?
Yeah, like the opposite effect.
That's wild.
It is. Some people even compare the anxiety to what you'd feel with hardcore drugs.
So it's not always a chill experience.
Not for everyone.
Okay, so it's clear that kava is pretty complex and can affect people differently.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about kava culture in the U.S. more broadly.
Okay, sounds good.
It's interesting how this ancient South Pacific tradition is finding its way into modern American life.
It is like you don't see people chewing and spitting out the kava root in Denver.
No, not really.
Which is apparently what they do for some ceremonies in the islands.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
But that's definitely not the norm in U.S. kava bars.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Right.
So someone in that YouTube interview said that kava bars in Denver are like a new kind of social scene.
Interesting.
And they said the atmosphere is pretty different from regular bars.
How so?
They said it's more open, relaxed, and welcoming.
Okay.
Less pretentious, maybe less of a social hierarchy.
Be more community focused.
Yeah, kind of like everyone's just there to chill and enjoy the kava.
I like that.
Yeah, and they made a point of saying that people who go to kava bars are usually seeking that experience out specifically.
So it's not like people just stumble in by accident.
Right.
They're going there for a reason.
Exactly. And apparently it can take a few tries to really feel the effects of kava.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you might not get the full experience on your first visit.
That's good to know.
And on a positive note, kava isn't considered addictive.
That's definitely a plus.
Yeah, so it's cool to see how this ancient practice is being adopted into modern American culture.
It is. But Kavasutra's story shows that it's not always a smooth transition,
Yeah, there can be some bumps along the way.
especially when you have controversies and conflicting viewpoints like we've seen here.
Right. It's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows.
So let's recap what we've learned about Kavasutra Kava Bar.
Okay, so basically, they're a chain with locations in multiple states.
Yeah.
They serve kava, which is a traditional South Pacific drink that's known for its relaxing effects.
Yeah.
And they market themselves as an alcohol-free social space.
So on the one hand, you have the unique kava experience, which a lot of people seem to enjoy.
Yeah.
Some reviewers mention a welcoming atmosphere, but that seems to vary a lot, depending on the location and even the staff working that day.
Right.
And of course, it's a good option for people who don't drink alcohol.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, there are those serious concerns we talked about.
Yeah, those are hard to ignore.
There's the whole history of offensive social media posts, the owner's past legal issues, the health concerns raised by New York City, and the mixed customer reviews, some pretty negative experiences reported.
Right, so it's a lot to take in.
It is. And that's why it's so important for you, the listener, to think about your own priorities
Yeah.
when deciding whether or not to check out Kavasutra.
What kind of priorities?
Well, things like inclusivity, ethical business practices, and your own personal tolerance for risk.
Right.
Because based on what we've seen, experiences can vary wildly depending on the location and even the specific day you go.
So do your research and proceed with caution.
Exactly.
So on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay, hit me with it.
Given everything we've discussed about Kavasutra and their history, does this place represent a genuine appreciation for kava culture? Or is it more of a case study in how controversies can overshadow even something that's supposed to be relaxing?
That's a good question.
What does their story tell us about the challenges of bringing culturally significant practices into new environments?
That's something worth thinking about, for sure.
Yeah, food for thought.
Definitely.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Yeah, appreciate you listening.
Until next time.
See ya.
Dive in deep, we're all